can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's your boy Ernie, the Blerd Without Fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, so today's video, we're going to be talking about X-Men number 16 and Storm number 8. So let's get right into it. Starting with X-Men number 16. This one is the fight that I have been kind of waiting on since issue number 1. During X-Men number 1, we were introduced to a group of characters called the Santo Marco 6. And we knew they were mutants. We knew they were also people who didn't grow up as mutants. They didn't gain their mutant abilities at, puberty or as a teenager, whatever the case. We knew that these were people who were all very likely adults who gained powers later, and this is all because of 3K. 3K now has their own X-Men team, and they're kind of dangerous. They're unleashing this team trained by former Alpha Flight enemy and member Wire, who I thought was a really interesting touch because while he is not a mutant, he is about as human as anyone else. He's technically a human mutate more than he is anything else. And the fact that he actually seems to have an attitude towards humans, referring to them as flat scans, even though that's a word typically only mutants use, to describe other humans, I thought it was really interesting that Wire actually had that attitude towards him, considering that he's had a very weird attitude towards mutants as well, but it's also because he doesn't see himself as a mutant either, because, well, why would he? He's not. But he thinks of himself as something else. So there you go. We're going to talk about these characters a little bit, try and figure out what we can glean from them just based on what we see of them in this issue, as well as the first issue where we first saw them use their powers. So let's get right into it. First off is going to be the character Constellation. Constellation's power seems pretty obvious. They basically have the ability to manipulate cosmic energy. This would almost kind of lead you to believe that they wield the power cosmic, but I don't think that that is exactly the case. I think it's safer to say they wield something more akin to the same types of cosmic rays and energies that turn the Fantastic Four into the Fantastic Four. That's basically the read I got on them from this. They also seem to think of themselves as the glass cannon of the team, the heavy hitter, compared to a lot of the other characters. And while their power does seem pretty potent, even against a character like Temper, whose power is merely fire and ice, Temper is able to pretty much shut Constellation down, to the surprise of no one, considering how powerful Edie is as a character. Next up is going to be the Speedster Time Bomb. I'm wondering if there's anything more to this character beyond just the super speed itself, but it does seem like maybe there might be an extra mutation somewhere in there just based on the name, because we don't really see them do anything explosive, but I guess maybe the whole time bomb thing is just how fast a time bomb can tick down. But ultimately, that's what their power is that they're superhumanly fast. So fast that their movements and intentions are entirely imperceptible to anyone who is not a psychic. Which I thought was a pretty neat little touch because of all the shit talking that Time Bomb does in regards to Psylocke, calling her a second-rate psychic and that she's not all that powerful, yet Psylocke was able to block every single move and attack that Time Bomb executed in this fight because Psylocke could read Time Bomb's mind just that well, despite the fact that Time Bomb was probably thinking a mile a minute, or maybe even a mile a second. I thought that was a really nice little touch to not only put some respect on Time Bomb's name, but to also keep some respect on Psylocke's name. Next up is going to be Psychovore, which is the psychic on their team. Now, as you would imagine, this being a psychic, yes, they very likely have abilities that range in the telepathy area, maybe even some telekinesis, because they do seem to be able to levitate themselves in a couple of particular spots, or as we have seen in some other spots. Whatever the case, he's the character we know the least about. The only thing we really know is that, while yes, he's very likely able to read minds and move things with his mind, his bread and butter seems to be eating the thoughts of his opponents, whatever that means. Whether this sustains him or empowers him is another story, but it's very likely the case. Next up is going to be Galatea, who is superhumanly strong and would also seem to have rock-like skin. It seems to be kind of a throw to the figure of Greek mythology, Galatea. Whether or not any of that has any actual real deal to do with any of this is another story altogether. But we know that whatever the case is, her rock form, whether she can change it or not, it seems to be tough enough that even Juggernaut can't move her when he strikes her. We saw this during the first issue of X-Men under Jed MacKay. When he first tried to strike her down, she didn't even flinch or move. So she's probably pretty damn powerful, pretty damn durable. She's very capable of taking some extreme punishment. And yeah, I think Juggernaut, he has his hands full on this one trying to take her down. There's also the character Juice, who, as you would probably imagine, having the name Juice, he is effectively living liquid. Now, being living liquid, that basically means that, yeah, he just walks around in a kind of watery juice looking for. He actually looks like a walking orange juice man is what he looks like. If you could just take a cup of Tang, pour it on the ground, and just stands up and starts walking around, or, you know, whatever. Like, he's enough to be almost translucent, but also at the same time, he seems to be able to control his form. His form allows attacks to literally go straight through him, though we did see in the first issue that he had a little bit of trouble with temper and her using her powers to heat him up. He didn't really seem to care for that very much, but he is able to take his form and reshape it and morph it in ways that, you know, he could find useful in combat. We see at a point where he uses his body to trap Juggernaut's head in liquid, effectively bypassing pretty much all of his strengths and weaknesses. It's not like Juggernaut can break the liquid or, like, you know, physically remove it from himself, and he does at the end of the day still have to breathe. So that's actually a pretty cool way that they're able to kind of get around Juggernaut in this particular issue. And then there is also, last but not least, Schwarzschild. Schwarzschild is an interesting one because basically his name means black child. I don't know what's going on there because he looks pretty white to me. I don't know. It's I don't know. I could be wrong. I don't know. I didn't really research the cultural significance of black child or Schwarzschild or whatever, but I'm scared to find out. But basically his whole thing is that he can manipulate gravity, and we've seen him do this before. He's been able to create what are effectively black holes, and he's also able to manipulate the gravity of singular individuals. You know, whether it's himself or someone else. We see in this issue where he's able to use his power to rob Magic of gravity, causing her to just fly off into the stratosphere. And we also see him use this very same ability to move Galatea, allowing her to fly up in the air the exact same way, but then give her gravity back so that she comes crashing down with incredible force, enough to knock Juggernaut on his ass. He's also got a little bit of a beef with Magic because in the first issue, she cut his arm off. So the arm we see him wielding, there's actually mention of how it's not his original arm. He's rocking a cybernetic arm of sorts. But so there's that. There's also, we can't forget about a potential 7th member of the group, and that is Piper Cobb's twin sister. This is why Cassandra Nova has been manipulating her and trying to get her to come over to her side. They want to add her metamorphic abilities to their already awesome arsenal with 3K's own version of the X-Men. It's interesting because really this is, well, yes, it's a handicap match. It's a 6-on-5 because, as you may or may not remember, Kid Omega is down right now. He's not involved in this. So we're looking at 6, X-Men versus 5 X-Men. And while Cyclops' team is powerful, they are getting their shit pushed in a lot by this other team. And there's no shame in it. There's no shame in it. This is a pretty strong team the 3K is putting out in the field. That said, if they add Piper's twin to the mix, well, the X-Men were already having trouble with her. They would very likely have worse trouble with her being with the other 6. But they may not have to worry about Piper's twin too terribly much because Magneto is going to be taking care of her. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking. Yes, Magneto has been having difficulty controlling his powers because of the RLDS, the resurrection-linked sickness that he's been dealing with because of having died during the Krakoan Age and having been resurrected. He does not have control of his powers anymore. And now Beast has finally finished developing the DX serum, what is effectively dextroamphetamine X. This is what's going to allow Magneto to use his powers again, granted only for a limited time. It's not to say that Magneto couldn't use his powers without it, it's just that he has no control over it. So it's better that he just not use his powers at all. Well, in this case, he's actually going to be able to use his powers, and here we see him back to his old Omega Mutant ways. And the wild sentinel that was, just kind of looming over Merle, Alaska, that we saw was like a remnant of the Fall of X battle against Orcus, well, there was always the reason why the sentinel was left there, to remind the people of Merle what they had done. The fact that Merle was used as a place to build these very same death machines, but also to remind them of who saved them when that death machine decided to not just kill mutants. Well, there's also another reason why that thing was left there, and it was so that Magneto could use it. And now Magneto has what is effectively a giant wild sentinel that he can now use to fight Piper's giant twin. How long Magneto will be able to control this thing, because I would imagine it would take incredible power to move this wild sentinel, because it is freaking huge. But I would imagine it would take great power, so however long Magneto is going to be able to hold this thing is anybody's guess. Or whether he's going to lose control or whatever the case. But he's going to have to fight Piper Cobb, but also not just fight her, but maybe try and get her to back down. And I'm really hoping that Piper doesn't throw in her lot with 3K. I really do. I actually would rather her, spend her time with the X-Men and maybe kind of play that story out with Piper and her twin. Maybe figure out some kind of a way for them to coexist. Because right now Piper doesn't really have a body of her own. She's piloting the body of a dead Akanti, like a space whale. That's all she's got. She doesn't have a body of her own. I wonder if they're gonna find a way to either give her her own body, or a way for her to turn that Akanti into a body similar to Piper, or if she'll end up returning to Piper at some point. I don't really know where that's gonna go, but we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, before we move on to our next thing, real quick, I just want to say, if you're enjoying this video and or you've been enjoying any of my videos, you just never subscribe to the channel, now's a really good time to do so. Hit that subscribe button, tap that notification bell. That way you don't miss out on any of my videos. Also, if you're still here by this point, make sure you hit that like button, because it helps out the channel significantly. It helps expand the reach by a lot. All right, so now let's get to our final thing, and that is going to be Storm number 8. This issue, we're getting to see more about what's going on with Storm and these other Storm gods who are trying to run her fade. And we didn't know why all these other gods were just wanting to fight her. It even kind of slick seemed like Thor wanted to fight her when he pulled up at the end of the previous issue. But as one would imagine, he doesn't ever really want to fight Storm. He and Storm are more friendly than they are with most people, especially considering that they both have what is not exactly a whole heap of a lot in common, but they are connected to something that is incredibly powerful, and that's the Mother Storm. Something Thor should be very intimately familiar with, considering that he just recently fought it in the Donny Cates run of Thor. But it seems like Storm is now learning a bit more from Thor about what it is that's actually heading her way. Now, I got to have a little bit of a conversation to the side with Marewa, the writer of this series, about this. He gave me a little bit of a tease of what's to come before the issue came out. But basically, by the time we get to this issue, we finally learn about the OG progenitor of the gods of the Storm, and that is a character by the name of Hadad. That is who is gunning for Storm right now, ultimately, and is bringing forth with him what is effectively referred to as the Thunder War. Now, what makes all this very interesting is that Hadad is not some character that Marewa just made up. He's actually been taking a lot of those characters we saw in the previous issue. Those were all actual gods from their various respective cultures and ideologies and religions. Well, as you would imagine, Hadad is also the same. He is a god that hails from a couple of different cultures, actually. The Canaanites, the Mesopotamians, the Sumerians, and depending on where you fall in, his name could either be Hadad, Adad, or Iskar. But at the end of the day, Hadad is who we're dealing with, and he is the god of the storm and the rain, and he apparently was a pretty big Billy Badass character. Now, we get a little bit of a tease from Thor where he states that Hadad was so badass that he took other very powerful entities in the Marvel Comics universe and brought them to heel. So that's a pretty big deal. He took characters like Eternity, the very same Eternity who Storm has now become the host for. He took Eternity and wove him into the cloak that he wore. It stated that he took the Phoenix Force and wore it as his armor, and that Infinity was wielded as his shield, something that was an affront to the one above all, the one and only entity in all of reality that Hadad could not defeat. And for those that do not know, the one above all is effectively God in the Marvel Comics universe, like the overall overarching God, the overwhelming force of good and light in the Marvel Comics universe. That was the only person in all of existence who could run Hadad's fade. That is huge. And the fact that right now Storm has the power of Eternity, she's gonna need every last single drop of it, because, you know, she's got a lot going on. She's got a lot of plates spinning right now. She's helping the Avengers. She's also doing a lot of stuff on her own solo dolo, and she is also having to deal with an upcoming big Dukaroo with Oblivion himself. And now you're telling me that she's also got to run hands with Hadad? And here's the other crazy thing about it, is that Hadad has largely been out of the mix because the one above all laid him down. However, the other issue that comes up is that this Thunder War that is on the horizon, the gods of the storm, they're all fighting for one side or another. There are Thunder gods who are fighting to try to stop the Thunder War from kicking off, and there's also Thunder gods who are fighting to make sure that the Thunder War goes off without a hitch. The question becomes, and is even posited here in this issue, whether or not the gods that Storm fought in the previous issue, whether or not they were involved on any level or another. We don't know what side they're fighting for. But we know that whatever side Storm is on, Thor plans to be on it, regardless of whether Storm wants his help or not. While she does actually, kind of blow off his help, it's very clear Thor is going to show up regardless, because he backs Storm at all times. But yeah, I'm very curious to see what's going to be going on with Hadad, what more we're going to be able to learn about him as a character. But yeah, the Thunder War sounds like it's going to be something pretty wild. And I like that the whole thing with Storm right now, the whole labors of Storm, the very kind of similar as Morewa described it before the series actually came out, said that Storm was going to be going through labors very similar to the Greek figure Hercules. Well, Storm is going through all that right now. And I love how she's just taking all this in stride. She, at various points, we see that even Oblivion has to take stock of the fact that Storm seems unbothered. She has so much on her plate, and yet the things that worry her aren't the things that should be worrying her. I love that. I love how that's done. I also love there's some little jabs at T'Challa and Iron Man in this that were pretty cool too. I also love that Morewa tried to kind of big up Reed Richards, but I ain't gonna let him have it. I'm not gonna let him have it. He can't have it. I'm not gonna let him have it. No. Reed might be happily married, but I goddamn promise you, Sue Storm ain't. And anyone who thinks differently can die mad about it. I don't care. I don't care. Y'all take that shit to the grave. But that's not really the only thing the Storm is dealing with in this issue. And there's also a whole other thing that's going on. And while I have said my piece about X-Manhunt, X-Manhunt is like a bad penny. It just keeps coming back up. Though I will say, I like what's being done here, because I felt this Storm was one of the better parts of X-Manhunt. And I think that Morewa, working with Gail Simone on the X Manhunt Omega issue, I thought was also one of the better parts of X-Manhunt. So I was actually really happy to see that some of the things that Storm did, like backing Charles Xavier, helping him in his efforts to get off planet effectively and go help his daughter Xandra out in the Shi'ar Empire. While all of that is very well and good, I actually liked that Storm is kind of facing the consequences of her actions here, because she basically helped what was effectively a wanted criminal. Here, Charles Xavier escaped from Greymalkin. That off top makes him a wanted criminal. And while yes, there's that, he also, while the rest of the world at large does not know this, but mutant kind now, I think by this point, has a better understanding of this, considering some of the events that played out in X-Manhunt, that Xavier didn't actually kill those humans that he supposedly killed during the Fall of X. And we learned more about this during the X-Men Xavier's Secrets one-shot, which if you have not checked that out, it's up here somewhere. But I will just say that the government, the US government, which is oddly filled with a lot of aliens right now. I do find this all very weird and interesting at the same time, because we know that Agent Lundquist, who works with the O&E, he is present in this issue as well. We don't really get to see him full frontal, but we do know that he's there. We see his silhouette behind the two-way mirror. I find it very interesting that the O&E is perfectly fine working with insectoid alien species, but have such a beef with mutants. It's one of those things, like, and I'm not blaming Moreau for this. This is a Marvel thing. This isn't Moreau. This is a problem with the status quo of mutants in the Marvel Comics universe that I think 110% lays squarely at the feet of Marvel Comics in general. And that's because they just don't know what to do with mutants. Like, it's like, okay, why do humans hate mutants so much when Captain America, Hulk, and it's not to say they don't hate Hulk. People hate the Hulk. But I mean, just why are we spending so much time in the Marvel Comics universe hating on mutants when we know that there are people out there who get powers later in life who are equally as dangerous? So yeah, it was one of those things where I just kind of looked at it, I was like, huh. Okay, so Agent Lundquist don't like Cyclops, but he's perfectly okay with Bug Terra over here, just chilling. Okay, all right. Interesting. But no, I like this part of the book, though, because it's holding Storm accountable for some of her parts to play in X-Manhunt. Not in a way that I feel like damns her in any way. I mean, I feel like she did what she felt was the right thing to do. Yeah, you can debate that all you want. But I did appreciate how she stood 10 toes down on business in the face of A Bug's Life. It was wild. It was crazy. It was crazy to me. And what also made this pretty damn cool too is that, and I don't know if Moreau was going for this or not. I mean, one of the things is that with Black people's history with government agencies, the CIA, the FBI, more specifically, and I'm talking about IRL, not talking about in Marvel. The idea is that Black people are usually interrogated in a very different way than what white people are treated. Just is what it is. Yeah, I mean, you can argue with your mama about that one. Don't argue with me. And I liked how Moreau set Storm up to be prepared for the interrogation to come, but at the same time, being very defiant in the face of interrogation, having all of her ducks in a row, every single documentation, every single piece of paper that could have been asked for, she had it ready, and basically almost effectively shut down the entire interrogation, almost off rip. Pretty much almost gave the fucking B-movie, whatever the fuck, no reason to carry on this investigation even further. But then they tried to bring up the idea or the notion that Storm was mentally manipulated into helping Charles Xavier, and I loved how Moreau was right there with it, ready to have Storm explain why she wasn't psychically manipulated, because she cannot be. She cannot be psychically manipulated because of how she fires the electricity and neurons in her brain, very similarly to how Gambit and Jubilee have neurons firing in their brain in such a different way that it's very difficult and virtually impossible to mind control them. And what I appreciate about that as well is that Storm knew what this was. She came into this, she knew what was going to happen. And the moment that any type of psychic manipulation was attempted, she was ready to throw it back. And what comes next is anybody's guess, but I have been told that we are going to be doing a lot of jumping around. So we're probably going to be seeing a little bit of Hadad, a little bit of the tease of the Thunder War, a little bit of what's going on here in this interrogation, and just kind of jumping back and forth between those things until the Thunder War is ready to fully kick off. But I'm very excited for it. I think that a lot of y'all should be excited for it too. If you are Storm fans, I think there's no excuse why you should not be reading this title. This is the best Storm book that has come out ever. There has been no Storm series that has been better than this one. And I know a lot of people think, oh, what do you mean? There's not been that many. Yes, there have. There have been a lot of Storm series. There have actually been quite a few Storm series, I would have you know. As a matter of fact, I think there have been at least 3 or 4 Storm series prior to this one. They have all been, yeah, this is the best one.